Recording is done.
So hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining in for this session today, which is on the 8th competency in ICF, which is facilitates client growth. And this falls under the cultivating learning and growth. One of the longest competencies, I believe, which has maximum number of markers. So just want to start straight away into the competency. And what it says, how it is defined under ICF is that it partners with the client to transform learning and insight into action. This is what the coach does. And what I understand this to be is that it's a kind of a bridge that a coach co-creates to move the client from within their head, that is the ideas and the insights, and from within their heart, that is all the emotions and the realizations that the client is having, to their hands, that is executing and actioning whatever ideas and thoughts they've had through the session. So as a coach, you leave them confident to be able to cross this bridge and reach where they started off with you for, whether it is only in that particular session or in the entire engagement, if it is a number of sessions that are planned. So to understand the significance, I'll just give you some examples. So imagine you're watching a brilliant movie where you have a great plot and you have a superb storyline. Yeah, and maybe fantastic direction, wonderful acting by everyone, except that while you're waiting for the climax, the movie just ends abruptly because there was no clear ending. There is a lot of disappointment, isn't it? And if I take an example from the world of business, sometimes we do these trainings for salespeople. So a salesperson maybe has made all the effort in his sales calls, telling about the features and the advantages and the benefits of the product. And then just forgets to pay heed to the most critical step, which is wrapping up and closing his session. So what is the result? There is no conversion that happens in that call. So, of course, the significance of transforming learning into action is pretty clear in terms of personal growth, in terms of professional success, and even improved well-being at times, depending on what is our agenda on that particular session with the client. But all of this will happen only when there is action that is taken, whether it is in between sessions or even beyond the session. Yeah. So we as coaches are required to do this, helping individuals bridge this gap between the knowledge and the action by providing the support and accountability. And in fact, anything else that will help them make a sustainable change. And I'll underline the word independently, because we do not, as coaches, create dependencies. Yeah. Now,
so if I share here, Bharti,
yes,
I was watching one of the, I don't know, videos or something like that. They said transformation is like baking a cake. So it should be like, okay, that is permanent, right? You cannot reverse it like into its ingredients again. So as you were talking about transform and having that bridge and coming to that actually sustainable kind of output that we are expecting in terms of action or in terms of changes that you're talking about. So I just thought of just fitting in that
example. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. So what is happening through this competency is actually converting the motivation, that the client gains maybe with you through the session or multiple sessions into sustained momentum. And therefore, we as coaches are expected to ensure that even the most aspirational, the most abstract insights turn into embodied action for our clients. And this competency gives us the opportunity to do that. So I again invite thoughts from anyone to share, like Renu did, on this competency based on maybe their examples or any experience that they might have. Okay, so I'll move on for what the competency underscores. So there are 8 pointers that are given under this one competency, and I'll just list them one by one. So what does it emphasize upon? Of course, I've just highlighted 2 words here saying empowering the client and for sustainable change. So these are 2 words that I've highlighted here. The entire competency is talking about their empowerment and making the change that we are helping them with to become sustainable. Yeah? Empowering means the autonomy that we have talked about, and sustainable, that irrespective of whether you're there or not, they are already ready with the action points or the thinking process of progressing towards what they desire. So I won't be reading all of these out. That's why I've just put them here. The pointers talk about working with the client to integrate new awareness or insight and learning the client's point of view in their worldview. And we have to do it in the client's best way. The second pointer says we need to partner, and the word that I want to highlight here is partnering. It's co-creating with the client by discovering what will truly work for them. The third point says acknowledging and supporting the client's autonomy. So our job as coaches is not to police or to parent them. We are partners. We are equals in the session and even beyond. We need, for this to happen, we need to just understand and operate from that premise that every individual is whole and complete. And the moment we start operating from there, we would not feel the urge to police or to become a parent. So the fourth point also talks about supporting the client in identifying the results, the potential results, and learning. So you help the clients look at the future scenarios and sometimes realize what they have learned, and they can continue to learn and explore rolling all of that into the next steps that they take towards progressing to reach their goal or their desire. The fifth point talks about inviting the clients to consider how to move forward, including the resources, support, and any potential barriers. So this also takes care of, other than resources, it's a kind of contingency planning, what I say, where we consider both the outer and the inner obstacles that the client may face while they're wanting to progress. And then partners with the client to summarize the learning and the insights within and between sessions. So here we are partnering with the client to connect this session, sometimes even to previous sessions. You know, when we are saying integrating the learning, if there are multiple sessions, we may have, along with the client, had a discovery that the client had for themselves. You may like to connect even those to this session. So it is not only what is happening currently or in that particular session, it's actually a journey that you have taken with the client or you've seen them take along the way. You are able to connect that, right? So it's perhaps creating a kind of context and therefore continuity as well. So in a way, you're reflecting in this entire process on the original contract that we did with the client. It could be the contracting before just this one session that you had, or in more cases, in fact, in my own experience, it's been sometimes reflecting back on the original contract which we have had for the entire engagement. What they wanted, what are the measures of success, what is the evidence, and actually this is progress towards the same. So the contracting piece and this competency actually walk along together. Yeah? Any reflections here?
So if I say that maybe that the third and the last one, they complete the loop in a way, like, right? We start with that measure of success, and actually we are solidifying that accountability in the last competency that we are talking about here today. That is competency 8. So this is what I understand.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there's another thing, Bharti, that comes here to mind. One of the things that I have observed during conversations, especially we needing to be mindful of the autonomy that needs to be given to the client. It's their journey, and the need to obviously step back and allow that space for their autonomy to exercise itself, is also situations which may translate to their realization that actually the goal they started out with may very well now be at a point where it either becomes redundant or irrelevant or needs to be relooked at.
Yeah.
So I've often experienced some of these conversations where then I've seen myself posing the question to say, okay, do you believe that the goal we started out with, maybe at the start of the contracting, is going to continue to be useful for you to work with, or do you want to consider either changing the goal or looking at it differently?
Yeah.
And to my mind, I think that also becomes very critical in this competency, isn't it? Because that is where we are allowing the space to also recognize that this being their goal may very well be at a place where it needs to be revisioned, if I may put it that way.
True. And in fact, Neera, I also realize when you're saying this that when we move to the markers, we'll be able to actually see those specific markers when at what stage this actually can happen or might happen easily when they start thinking or reflecting upon the who and the what. It's after those markers itself that this question may arise for the coach to bring in that conversation. Yeah, so yes, you're absolutely right in
Yeah,
sharing.
you
And I
brought up a
had it, and I had it with Neera, and I think I can very much resonate with it, because what I started with actually, and towards the end, I said, no, Neera, I think I need to reframe what I was expecting. And so I think resonating very well with that, what Neera is saying. It happens. Yeah.
So Renu, thank you for sharing that. In fact, I will bring this point up. I've seen in one of our common sessions in a learning journey, where it happened another time. I'll bring that at an appropriate moment. Just remind me in case I don't.
Sure. And in addition, I quickly recalled a very recent experience where I have been engaging with a client on a certain set of goals that this person identified. And I think within the second or third conversation, there was a realization which was way deeper in terms of the alignment of values for this individual, which led to this individual going back to the drawing board and saying, I need to change that goal. That's no more my goal. So we recontracted the goal and looked at what those, markers of achievement for the person will be. So I think the way I'm interpreting this is for every session, for us as a coach to be in that space of awareness to not allow ourselves to be caught in what we started out with. Sometimes it can happen, and I'm just calling this out not to say that it's happening, but the need for that awareness as a coach to be working, that this is about the coachee. Along the way, if the coachee is seeing the need to relook at the goal started out with, this is the journey of the coachee. And therefore, what do I do to create that space for that individual to go ahead and look at it differently and then be comfortable with shifting gears and looking at a different goal now? It could be a completely different goal. In this case, which I'm relating, it's a goal along the same lines, but a completely different goal. Right? And all of it has happened because of the realizations along the way of the person's belief systems and values and the need to align to those values.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank
thanks.
you. Thank you for sharing. So I've just taken some of these pointers and clubbed them into two buckets. So I've taken the pointer 1, 6, and 7 together, as these are the ones which are more about facilitating the client's sustainable forward movement in all those 8 pointers, right? So we understand that part of coaching process is actually helping the clients to realize and articulate their learning so that it becomes so rooted in their current thinking. So when I'm saying that, sometimes what happens is, as the human mind works and what I've experienced, that these realizations flash through our minds so quickly that unless we ask the client to sometimes slow down their thinking and allow them to articulate their discoveries, these discoveries, if they are articulated, can be a powerful learning experience for them. And if we don't allow them to do that, they may just not register as learnings for them at times. Yeah. Just to take an example, and I'm just using this question to reiterate what I just said. There was something that was happening in a session, and I had to stop the client and say, okay, so now that you've had this new information, now that you're aware of this, how does it change your thinking about the situation, or how does it change? And that's exactly where, Neera, the example that you took, where you see sometimes the goals changing, or sometimes they see the situation in a very different lens. Yeah. So these are where I feel that when you incorporate these realizations into, help them do that into their thinking, their lifestyle, their behaviors, that's where the real power of coaching resides. Yeah? And we just have to ensure that our clients are just not taking actions or completing the tasks that you've discussed in a particular session, but continuously progressing between sessions. It may not just be a tick in the box that, hey, this is what we had agreed, this is what I've done, I'm sending photos, I'm sending a checkbox saying, yes, I've done all of that. But even if the person has not been able to do that for whatever reasons, this is the time when we actually check in for any relevant progress or any experiences they've had between sessions, which was crucial for them to progress from where they started. Yeah, and it's helpful when they share it through these competencies. So, of course, celebrating when the last one here, the 7th one, celebrating actually means that you're building in some reward system. It's a way of motivating them so that they continue to make progress. They continue to sustain that momentum they started with, because it is for all of us. It sometimes gets so mundane and sometimes just gets so tick in the box that you just want to finish off the task that your coach may have, you may have agreed with the coach, but you feel that you're now stuck after doing that. So some small milestones, and when we start celebrating, that's what it helps the client with. And when I want to, I think my cursor is moving away too fast. Okay. So the next set of competencies that I want to club together, this bucket from 2 to 5 in the last competency, is more about goal setting to move forward, right? That was facilitating them to move ahead. This is more for goal setting per se. So, for example, in the second one, it says whenever we are partnering with the client to design as part of contracting, it's always helpful that we are setting goals not only for this particular session, but if it is a longer engagement, we also relate this goal to any of the contracted goals previously in previous sessions. If you find that they're related, or ask them, are they related in your, where does this goal stand in, in the entire bigger picture that you had set out for yourself? Or what is it that you want to achieve? How does this specific goal for this session fit in there? Yeah. And in the process, we also help them how the actions they choose will bring them closer to that outcome. So we are integrating through these set of pointers into their daily lives, and also finding out the how it would all integrate up in their life, right? Rather than just the what. Okay, I will do this, but how is that integrating in my life? How is that integrating with the entire bigger goal, the long-term goal, the way that I want to see myself, if that's the kind of engagement that you are in with a client. And as I said, when you ask the client to speak their learnings out loud, it actually solidifies the learning, because they actually get a chance to actively think about those learnings and say and even listen to the learnings. So you are helping them use more than one senses. You're allowing them to articulate it. You're allowing them to hear it. And when you allow them to do that, it becomes stronger and gets registered with them much more actively, rather than just being passive about some realization I may be thinking in my head. And as the fourth pointer says here, when we are helping the client generate the plan for forward movement, it is also a kind of personal commitment that they start making to themselves. And once they decide what are the steps they will take, that is when the client, we can support the client to dig into how, and these steps that he's wanting to take, how will they impact, how will each of those steps impact them in the real life situation. So by asking them what might even hinder, as the fifth point says, their progress, and what are the resources, we are helping them to create a successful plan. Yeah. Rather than just thinking about, I will do this. The moment we start asking them, okay, what can go wrong? What is it that you see as an obstacle? That is where they start thinking of the contingency plan. That is when they even can think about a backup plan, right? So we are just helping them create something which will be much more sustainable, rather than they may just get into a plan and say, okay, this is my roadmap, not looking at the obstacles. And then when they hit a block, they may just stop and find themselves stuck if they haven't thought through with you in this session. So that's where I would say, overall, our role as a coach is we are gearing them for success, which I found this as a brilliant way to reflect that success might look like this for them. So any sharings, any comments, any views that you might like to share before we move into the markers?
No, I think good so far. And I love what you have on this slide. We cannot become what we want by remaining what we are, which I think is the essence of facilitating that journey forward, and helping them internalize the need for the shift, that bridge that we talked about, the exploration, and then getting to the other side in terms of what you want to achieve. So, yeah, love this.
Okay, so let's get into the markers. So there are 9 markers in all in this competency. And the first one talks about the coach invites or allows the client to explore progress towards what the client wanted to accomplish in the session. So this truly acts as a compass. that periodically points back to the client's goals during the entire coaching journey, ensuring that we're both staying on track, right? So sometimes I've experienced that while in a conversation, the client may digress, or sometimes even the coach may take a direction which is not really moving towards what the client wanted to achieve or helping in a goal. I might at that point in time pause and ask, I wonder how this helps you move forward or helps you move towards where you want to go or what you wanted to accomplish in this session. So one, that's a good way of checking back, steering back, moving the wheel again to the direction where we want to go. Or for you as a coach to understand this person may have something underlying or cooking underneath and the person doesn't know, but it's coming out during your conversation, which truly is related to where he wants to reach and which he or she was not able to articulate to you, or you as a coach could not pick it up in the conversation. So it's a good way of understanding and clarifying what is being talked about. Is that moving in the same direction? Is it helping accomplish what they wanted to? And again, of course, what are some questions I would want to know from any one of you who wants to say, what are some questions that are helpful towards this marker that you might ask the coachee here?
So this could come up at the end of a conversation, checking on whether the coachee or the client has accomplished what the person set out to do. It could also come up at a time where you could have a sense whether anything is coming in your own way as a coach or something is coming in the way of the coachee that may either be taking the coachee away from their intended goal, or like you just pointed out, it could be a deeper belief which you realize may be needing to surface. And that may be a good opportunity to ask whether the coachee is feeling that there is a need to pause on the intended outcome of the session and explore something else and seeking their permission to do it. So, I think one of the things as a coach, when you start off with a session and contract and help them understand what they want to achieve and state that, can sometimes come in the way of pausing to recognize that there is something deeper that needs addressing here, because there is this realization of what the coachee or the client wants to achieve. So I think here, to me, the way I think about it is both being aware of what's happening inside you, and also when focused on the who of the person, also picking up what could be working in the below the iceberg, as you would put it. What's working there? And does that require for me as a coach to pause and ask to say, do you believe that we need to continue the conversation to what you set out to achieve? Or do you think you want to pause at this moment and spend a few minutes to reflect on what may be happening here? How would you like to proceed? So I would think that is where we've given both the autonomy as well as the space. Because I think one of the things that I started out with is the realization that many times they are also going through this whole dilemma of, is this really the goal I need to be working with? Am I going through a shift in the goal that I need to be working with? So that's the way I'm thinking about it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Nida. Any specific questions anyone would like to share?
So
right.
it can
Yeah.
be like what's coming up for you right now in the session. So again, a question, what answers will be given by the coachee, as Neera shared that this is where awareness and all that. So for that, if I frame a question, I can just ask that, what's coming up right now for you? Or
Yeah.
is there any learning that is that you're means it can be any learning or it can be any insight that is coming up for you right now at this point in the session. So this is how we can ask, maybe coming to the same, what answers coachee or the coach
Yeah.
would be having within them, definitely, but the question can be this way, what I feel.
Yeah. So these are some questions that I could write for it. As Neera, you pointed out, more often than not, this is something that I do in my sessions pretty early on. So let's say I would say, okay, we are like 20 minutes in our session. What do you think you have achieved? Is there some kind of clarity? So that, as I said, if it is acting as a compass, it's also giving me direction. It's also giving me some sense. And it's also giving time and space to the coachee to think through the session, think through the learnings thus far. So, what do you think you've achieved from a discussion so far? If it is a few minutes into the session, and of course, it can always be used in the end for sure.
Yeah, but if we are keeping on track, that also is a very, very clear because that alignment, as you shared, so that alignment is important, so that what direction we are going, is it okay, or we need to shift, or we need to recontract, or maybe what's something different that, as Neera shared, that's maybe something he feels that, no, this is not even what I'm wanting to talk right now. Maybe it is not. So something more important than that emerges, and the coachee says, no, I would like to. So as I learned, it's said to be like midpoint check-ins, like in between the sessions that we say.
Yeah, that's the word I use. It's a check-in. Yes, Neera.
Yeah, I think I'm also, while I'm hearing this, I'm also being mindful of sometimes the importance of silence in itself being the appropriate question. For example, if I'm in a conversation where a person is on a journey of self-exploration, reflection, at a place where it could be very crucial for the individual to gain insights, then the way I'm thinking about this, and please tell me if I'm thinking right or wrong, is to say at that point in time, allowing the client to explore progress may come more from just silence also. And I'm questioning myself here, so I would seek your perspective as well to say, would I, and I love the compass metaphor, by the way. I love the way that you brought up the compass. I made a note of it for myself because it's an excellent way to connect to the competency here. But in context of the compass, to also ask myself, what is the appropriate time for me? So the questions which are so critical, so relevant to also ensure that the compass perspective is not lost, but also asking yourself whether that compass perspective needs to be retained by maybe not asking right now, but just allowing that space for reflection.
You're right.
Is another
You're right,
thought that's
Neera.
coming to my mind.
Yes, you're so right. So right now, see, the importance of silence can never be overestimated. Yeah. However, when we are talking in terms of, so currently for the purpose of what we're doing right now, when we're saying for this marker, so silence doesn't require a marker. Silence requires your presence. Silence can be it can be at any opportune moment in the client coach conversation, right? So yeah, so that's why I don't even want to bring silence here. Reason being that it is above and beyond all these questions.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
And
That's a valid.
Neera, if I add on here, maybe when I ask this question, that takes the coachee into that thought process, or maybe then you need to be in a silence, that you can give that silence to the coachee and let him explore for himself, right? Where are we leading, actually? Where are we going together, partnering, and where are we leading together? So maybe after this question, that silence, I think that also can be a way how we can help the coachee to explore.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Renu, for bringing this. I think that answers both our I think that's the brilliant way, that once you have posed a question where you're allowing them to think through, silence is a must after this question. This is not somewhere the client may just have answers ready for themselves. Forget about sharing with the client. They need that time to think through for it. Okay, so I'll be a little mindful of the time, and we are on the first marker. So the second marker talks about, so first, second, and the third marker actually is what we've already spoken about right now in our conversation. The coach invites the client to state or explore the client's learning in this session about themselves. So we did that. We did contemplate upon the first three markers while we were discussing the first one, honestly. Now here, this is actually handing over a mirror to the client, because we are allowing them to see themselves much more clearly and understanding their own identity better. Yeah, so that what I picked up from somewhere is this is allowing them the eye for the eye. They are able to see the being, their values, what Neera you brought about. That's the time they're able to see some beliefs. They're able to dig up and understand my own sense of purpose. Where does this relate to it? Where are my values related to what I'm doing? Yeah? So this is exactly how we discussed when we're allowing the client by asking the question, what is coming up for you, for yourself? How do you see yourself differently? Or where is this place? How does this relate to your values if you've had a conversation earlier? Or where does this actually integrate with your sense of purpose or your larger purpose or your higher purpose, right? How are you feeling more aware of yourself? Is there a new learning you've had about yourself? Do you see yourself in a different light? No? Or how do you see yourself in a different light? So this is the who, when we're able to discover and allow the space for the client to do it. And something so beautiful that I found, dear you, make peace with the mirror and watch your reflection change. That's truly something that I see happening through this marker. When they're able to see their armors, their fears, their strengths, sometimes their triggers, that's a discovery moment. And you just allow them be in that space by asking some questions and then giving them space to reflecting, and if they wish, articulate as well. And very related to this is the third marker that I would want to bring up here is the same thing you're able to invite the client to do for the situation or the issue or the problem, as they may want to call it, right? So maybe together you're able to reframe or see the problem or the issue in a very different angle. You know, sometimes they're able to remove the generalizations that they're making. You know, sometimes they're saying, I always find it, everyone does this. And through this conversation so far, they're able to see that that's not true, right? It may even emerge that they find that the situation is not really as bad as they had thought when they started. Or maybe it has much more meaning than they thought when they brought it up. It could be either ways, right? So it is so important to allow them to see what they've been assuming. And then you ask them how it has changed through maybe some questions, and then allowing them the space to come to you and accept it or say, no, this hasn't happened, and share what comes up for them. So this is where, why I was saying the markers 8.1, 2, and 3, they're so useful. I find them so useful to ask during the conversation, somewhere midways as a check-in. Because based on these realizations, the other bucket that I shared earlier is actually talking of goal setting and actions and thinking on certain lines. Now, unless these 3 pointers get you the direction, and it is a checkpoint whether the compass is pointing to the right direction or not. If you start setting goals too early, they may be set in a wrong direction or superficial. I won't say wrong direction, maybe in a very superficial direction. So these 3 pointers for me sometimes are most useful when I've been in sessions, and based on my experience, that's what I'm sharing. And after hearing from both of you, it feels all the more so that it's a shared experience with all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you would like to share further before we move on to the next one?
Not really. I'm actually, when I'm hearing this and I'm hearing you, I can suddenly visualize a couple of experiences of a coaching relationship where uh, it was very deep insights the person gained as an outcome of wanting to get to a certain solution with context to a very clear objective, and then suddenly realizing something way deeper, you know, and that answered so many things for the person, because suddenly the individual was able to see it from a very, very different lens to say, oh, okay, so I know where that's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
which is so powerful, you know. You feel that energy is so infectious when you see that shift happen. Uh,
Yes.
and it inspires you to say, okay, so where are we going from here now?
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
it's giving it
really, Neera, when you say that, I don't know, gradually what I'm feeling is trust the process. I don't know, so much I'm relating to this, no? Trust the process. Just be there and trust the process, because I think every competency has its significance, why and how the structure has been, and how is it helping you to, okay, go there actually for what this is meant for. So
Yes.
that trust the process, now uh, I think breathing in that now, because now when we are experiencing more and more sessions and we are finding that, okay, how it is happening. So that is really amazing for me, actually, I would say, and enjoying the process. So that's what comes for me.
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, so I'll try and move a little quickly. Um, the fourth marker actually takes a much larger view on how coaching truly fits into the client's life. Yeah, it checks whether that action plan that they are building is aligning with a larger goal or not, right? Whatever they want to accomplish in their life. And that is why it says invites the client to consider how they will use the new learning from this coaching session. Because it's this translation of what they have got from this session in terms of a reflection or thinking or idea or an action plan. How does it truly translate into what they're going to do with it in their life? And does it actually even fit in their life? If it does, how well? And if it doesn't, what needs to be adapted in the surrounding, in the people who matter, in their actual life, to make sure that this can truly fit in and translate from learning to action, right? So what's your way of working around this? What is it that you would want the client to, um, how is it that you ask the client or invite the client to see how it fits in the real life for them?
Yeah, I think I would couple it with some very, very simple questions towards where is the appropriate time to say what has been most useful to you as a learning today, and how do you see it change the way you would like to function go forward. And after hearing that out, also to couple it with, so do you think you'd like to take some actions which will tell you that you are moving in the direction you seek to move? So that's typically what I would do. And of course, the question can be reframed in different ways depending on the
Correct.
situation, the conversation, the timing, etc. And also in line with what you've suggested here. But that's typically what I would focus on.
To add on to that, maybe if I say that, how committed are you feeling right now towards this action or whatever you are planning for yourself? Because that commitment, maybe if on a scale, if we can ask them, right, where you are, and then what can be the derailers that can be there. So from there, I can take it further, maybe.
So in fact, very right, Renu. This is a brilliant question, and it fits in with another marker where they talk about the commitment level as well. So yes, it would certainly fit in. For example, it is here
Yeah.
when the next marker talks about 8.5 says you partner with the client to design the post-session thinking, reflection, and action. So this goes, every marker goes much deeper and into a very different domain. And rather than saying it goes from a broader to a niche area. Yeah? Each marker is taking and drawing upon a very particular, so it's becoming pointed. The needle is becoming more pointed with each marker is what I feel. So this is actually underlining the learning journey continues post the session, right? How will the client really contemplate and reflect in a mindful way? This is about self-inquiry and the actions, right? Let's take an example. There's a case where, I'm talking about career transition with the person. So after discussing their career goals, the client may want to plan spending some time reflecting on their values and aspirations before they're able to take a major decision of a job change. They may even want to decide to create some action plan post the session to network with the industry professionals. Then they might even have some action points to say, okay, hey, I'm going to go on LinkedIn for the network. I'm going to attend some events. So this is what might happen post your session. Yeah. So this is the kind of thinking they're doing of what they're going to do after your session. And I somehow feel this is where a coach can start supporting with some tools as well for in-between sessions, for allowing what they want to do and supporting them in that journey. For example, I'll share, so there was a lot of reflection and discovery happening in one of the sessions, and just here is where I was able to take permission and say, hey, would you want to get a tool that will help you do what you're doing? And we were talking about what are the armors that were coming up for the person. And that's where post the session, I shared the story of the knight and the rusty armor. And it was a very beautiful tool for that person to be able to do what they wanted to do through that tool. It allowed them to go deeper into the reflections that they wanted, the self-discoveries that they wanted to do. So similarly, there could be some journal prompts to guide the client for post-session reflections that I might offer after taking permission that, okay, they're thinking about certain things and they come up, I would want to do this, but I'm not able to. So you then take permission and say, okay, would you want some help? And then you can suggest and find out some relevant prompts for journaling, maybe. So that's where these are certain markers from marker 8.56. I feel that there's certain tools. It allows us to partner when we say this is how we can partner in between sessions, to allow them to do it much more meaningfully, making it easier for them to do what they want to do in that direction. Yeah. So, and I used to wonder before understanding how is it that I can partner more and how is it that I can use the tools, because sometimes I don't want to use any tools during the session. Yeah, because it's the coaching conversation. I feel you as a coach is a tool for them. And that itself is a powerful tool that you're allowing them to use. But I found these pretty useful. So for marker 8.6 goes further into another area when it says that you partner with the client to consider how to move forward, including what are the resources, support, and the potential barriers. And that this is also where some tools would help. But you could actually, in this marker, sometimes I speak about the past successes that they have overcome, some challenges that they've overcome for those successful moments, and some strengths that they might like to leverage. And these are things that when you remind them of, when you ask them questions around it, they're able to see that they will be able to overcome any challenges. They are able to see that they have more resources than they think right now, right? In their arsenal. So, and that's where, Renu, like you said, sometimes I ask the scaling question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated do you feel? Because if they say they want to do so much, and I see that they're saying I'm motivated to a 5, that's where the inquiry of what will take. So, what are the resources? What are the obstacles that they see? What is the support they want of people, processes, or anything else, or from the coach that will take them from a 5 to a higher number, right? So I find the scaling question very, very useful here when we are able to see, okay, if 5 or if 6, what out of resources support barriers that we might need to handle to be able to help you reach higher and scale it up to a much higher number. And even some frame action planning templates. These are very basic tools that can be useful for supporting them in that journey between sessions. So what comes up for you for these markers, 8.5 and 8.6?
So what comes up, as in what I have seen coming up for me is so one of the things that I really liked, Renu, was your, this question around commitment. How committed are you? Such a simple question. Though, of course, when I think about it, I also think of it in context of the client I'm dealing with. Just to give you an example and to give context, one of the individuals I'm working with right now is so high on accountability that I don't even feel the need to ask a question like that, because the person's possibly 2 steps ahead in terms of already being accountable to what needs to be done. But what I do see happen there is to check on, are there some suggestions or are there options you would like to consider which may help you demystify this for yourself? Checking with them what it is that interests. Is it something that they like to learn from? Is it something they'd like to watch? Is there something they would like to read based on? And I think all of it, we're talking in context to the person we are engaging with.
Yeah.
Because along the journey, we also learn about, what works with who.
Yes.
What's going to be the appetite of that individual? Is this person really high on accountability? I don't need to worry about asking that question on commitment. I know this person will do it. But what I could support the individual with is to say, where is it that you think I can be of help to you? Is there something you need help from me on as you move forward before our next session? Is there something I can suggest to you that will be useful for you to do between now and the next discussion we have? So those are a few things I hear myself doing to make sure that you're doing both, exploring how they move forward, and then also partnering with them on what they want to do as they move forward. So that's what's coming up for me right now. Interestingly, while I'm thinking about it and talking to you, I can also recall a conversation where I got a response to say, I don't know.
Yeah. And yeah, that's awesome.
And that becomes interesting.
Mm.
Because that's telling you so many things. And I am yet to kind of follow through on that conversation with this individual where it came up, because we were almost at the end of a conversation, which meant that you needed to set up time for the next conversation to explore. But you can always hear that there's something else going on under the surface. So I'm actually going to be interested to see how that part of it develops in the next conversation. Should it come up for conversation, because that's where you are hearing something's going on. You're also telling yourself it's not your place. It's still the person's
Yeah.
place for them to discover it. So is there something that they need to discover, but you have to drop it at that and say, okay, let's see how it goes. So it was a very interesting situation, because it suddenly leads you to a place where you know that they are not going to be able to move forward right now. Something's holding them back. So that's the other thing that's coming up for me, which becomes a very interesting dynamic at play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So Renu, I would really want to acknowledge you for this one question. I have really found this very powerful, the scaling. It is a way that has helped sometimes both me and the coachee move forward uh, in so many ways.
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about something intangible, at least one can tell you that, okay, here I am in terms of how I feel or how I am experiencing it, right?
Mm.
So, intangible conditions, may we can just use this as a great question. So, that is how we can move ahead.
Yeah, I think, Renu, to add to the point you're making, because I also use this whole scaling piece quite often wherever I feel the need to do it. And I think what it also helps them do is that sometimes the individual is also grappling with what it means for that individual. And suddenly bringing their attention back to where they would rate it suddenly makes it very objective for them, because then it's also helping them, like that mirror image that Bharti presented, it's also like helping them see that mirror to say, okay, oh, okay, so this is where I am, which also brings into awareness to say, okay, which means I need to get work done here.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So, how I relate with this, with the situation is, Neera, I would like to share exactly the same place where a person has been saying, this is so useful for me, this is so important for me, it holds so much significance, and I'm only committed to a 6.
Yeah, interesting.
So rather than saying, oh, why 6? It's actually a good place for the coach to just show the mirror right there, saying, if it is a 6, do you think you'll be able to really do it? Because you're coming back to say, oh, but I have this to do, and I have this to do, and I have this to do. So it automatically shows how committed I am to the cause that I'm bringing to the table. Whereas when I started with telling the coach how significant this is, and this is a life-changing event, it holds so much of importance. And when it comes to prioritizing it to be able to action it out or work on it in the real life, I'm only saying I may not be interested. So that's also something that
That's a
comes
very
up.
interesting perspective too. Absolutely. Yeah, it's actually fascinating how many dimensions it can open up.
Well, so moving on to the marker 8.7, which talks about accountability. And, this is just to say, hey, how are you going to stay on track? It's just as simple as that, right? And truly want to figure out as a coach, what are the structures or assistance that the client may need to put in place to make sure that they are able to keep their commitments to themselves. Yeah. And more importantly, that they're not depending on the coach. So it's an accountability that the client is able to hold for themselves, right? And they are required for their own growth and change, which is more sustainable rather than the coach either becoming the parent or the police saying, hey, you said this, so I'm holding you accountable. No, how is it that they would like to hold themselves accountable, right? And when we're exploring this planning, this accountability planning, sometimes what comes up in the conversation is a discussion around their habits. Something like procrastination may come up. What is it that might stop you? So how would you keep yourself accountable to that? Knowing that that has come as an obstacle, how would you want to ensure that you will be able to overcome? Now, what would you remind yourself of when that comes up and you know that that's a habit? What is the change that you may require? Is there some experiment that you might like to do to see if it works for you? Right? So anything that the client really decides may be a helpful way for them to embody and integrate whatever has been discussed and discovered in the session per se. Yeah? So this is also where the client may want you to be an accountability partner, but that's for us only to offer when they ask for that help. Right? So we say, how is it that I can help you? So if they come up saying, be my accountability partner, very good. But we need not from our, from our own urge to be a support system, offer that I can be your accountability partner, right? So I've seen that come up for me several times. How
Same
would
here.
you want me to support? Yeah.
Same here.
And yeah. So I realized that asking them how they would want my support is a better idea than say, do you think me being your accountability partner? Yeah. So there's a difference. They may have other support systems. They may have other accountability methods that they might want to practice, right? Something may be better for them. And the moment we say we are offering ourselves on our own, they stop thinking and looking into that closet or that treasure of their own accountability resources, is what I have noticed. And this one is a beautiful one, which says, coach celebrates the client's progress in learning. Now, several ways to do that. And in fact, what I have been practicing, and I found it very useful if it is a longish relationship, it's an engagement for a couple of sessions, I actually take a moment to acknowledge progress that has happened between sessions as well. Right? Not only what has happened in the end, and we say, okay, I want to acknowledge you for this that you did, but I would like to do it for the client, irrespective of whether it is progress over the course of the relationship entirely or only for this particular session. It could even be the progress that you're seeing of a person moving from one way of thinking to another. Yeah? And when you're able to do that, I feel a sincere word of acknowledgement works wonders. It could be acknowledging their attitude. It could be something that they said that stood out for you. It could be an insight that they gained, any strength, talent, or skill maybe, anything, noting their progress, that itself could be celebrated. What it does is it just helps them build the momentum, because it gives them that motivation that gets translated into the momentum. Otherwise, the self-doubt sometimes is there in their mind, and they keep thinking, hey, I know I'm doing it now, I'm saying yes, would I be able to do it? So the moment you start showing them that they've done it several times, or this is what you feel they're able to do. And in fact, an interesting concept that I would like to bring here is the recency effect. Yeah. So how you left them feeling in the session, because this is towards the end, this competency, this is what is happening towards the end of the conversation of the session. How you left them in the session, what they were feeling at that time is really important, because they remember that. They get out of the session in that feeling. So when they're acknowledged, that's when they feel empowered and motivated to take those actions, to get into that reflection, really make progress to the next stage of where they want to be. Yeah. And the last marker is the coach partnering with the client on how they want to complete the session. This is the ultimate of autonomy. When you say, okay, in these last few minutes, this is what we've done. Is there anything else that you want to include or cover? What's the best way for you? What's most appropriate way for you to end the session? They may want to actually summarize at this point in time. They may want to just say, hey, I just discovered so much. And, actually do a reflection again, or speak out and articulate all that they're taking away, or articulate what they're going to do in the form of a summary as well. So for all of us, this is one beautiful stage to allow the client to end the session in whichever way, whether reflection, or they may just want to say, okay, hey, I just have one more thing that I want to talk about before we close. So we just allow them that liberty, that freedom to choose. So that's about the markers. Anything that any one of you would like to share here? before we move on to the last rung and almost the last slide of it, to talk about what are the challenges that may come up.
So, good set of questions, I think, Bharti. I think that we'll be leveraging what I'm finding for myself, and learning from experiences that is happening in the session for me. So thank you for bringing such good questions, and that will be added on to our
The memory bank.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So much. We are actually just co-learners on this path. So what are the challenges? The last bit, what are the challenges that a coach might face for
So,
ensuring that you're able to do this?
yeah. So I was listening and thinking through what are some challenges that come up. And here are a few that have come in my observation, especially when we're looking at the last bit, when we're looking at closing the session out. One, of course, can be the challenge of time, because like it or not, we are committed to allowing the space for the client to continue to think. And therefore, in a way, the control of thinking is with them. So it's interesting how we need to continue to keep coming back and re-looking at what you'll do differently. So of course, I realize that recontracting is one of the most powerful ways of continuing to bring them back to what needs to be done. And I interestingly have seen myself do more of that. Second thing, when it comes to if I should put, I don't know if challenge is the right way, but I'm just sharing observations in terms of what does happen. The other that I've observed that does happen is allowing the space, which we must, and I do that too, for the client to determine the end of the session and what it means for that person to do. And I think it's a very powerful way of ending it. So I love that suggestion from you. Also can translate to a reflection, which is opening up a conversation, right?
Mm.
And the way I have been able to utilize it is to then offer it as an opportunity for them to consider if that is what they would like to make the next thinking session about. So it does also, like I said, pose an opportunity. Sometimes, again, it's so client dependent. It could mean that you end up being in a situation where you're looking at the time, you're realizing that they are also pressed for time, you're also pressed for time, and it's opened a very different thought process for them. So that can become a very palpable challenge to deal with.
So absolutely.
So those are a couple of things that came to my mind to say, okay. And while I was listening to you in my mind, I was also processing to say, okay, do these things do happen? What have you seen yourself do? And also, what could you be doing in that space at that point in time? And my takeaway from that was to say, yeah, that is the time when recontracting becomes so important to help them come back to say, hey, we are coming to the end of the session. I really value what I'm hearing. Do you believe you would like to use this as the opportunity for our next conversation? So it's come up a couple of times where I've used that also as an approach. But I think every situation tends to be different. And I think what's beautiful about it is it's constantly compelling us to see how we will reinvent ourselves as a coach. What is the muscle we are going to build for ourselves to see how we can use that situation to be innovative about how we go about managing that situation and still be able to do what needs to be done within that framework. So so that's the challenges part of it. Coming back, I want to thank you, Bharti. This has been such a beautiful session. I've got like 3 or 4 things that I've written down for myself here. The compass metaphor was so powerful for me. I'm just going to keep it there in my, C8 compass. It kind of just brings everything back to perspective. Where do they want to go? Where are they going? And how are we can continuing to recontract to ensure that they are able to get to where they want to get to. The other that really resonated with me was your eye, the eye. which is so powerful. I'm taking it with me to make sure that I can put it to use. And of course, I loved the last point on can we continue to allow them the space to decide how they want to end the session. So those are three very, very meaningful takeaways that I'm taking away from the session today. I loved your question, Renu. How committed are you? I think that's
Thank
clear.
you.
Interestingly, like I say, there was another session where there was a statement that stuck in my head.
So
Another colleague saying, okay, if you're sharpening the saw, you need to go cut wood.
cut the wood.
It stayed there. So it's really helping me drive my purpose. So I think it's been so powerful. So some of these realizations are so powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So just wrapping up with a couple of challenges that I've noticed. Of course, there could be several. And the first one is always time for most of us that, we've discussed beyond this, outside of this session as well. Otherwise, yes, and because it's always towards the end when you're trying to. However, I've always found it very useful, and the reason why I took up this competency for this presentation purpose is because I felt that I needed to learn a lot more about it and practice it much more. So I thought this was the best way. So it's always good to take permission to stretch if required, but not cut short this most important, because ultimately otherwise there is no climax in the movie and it's such a disappointment. Moving on, there's certain external challenges that the client may say, the personal circumstances, how much I want to take action on this, but because of festivities, because of all of this, how do I take action between sessions? So these are external challenges that the client may come up, and that's when you ask them and say, hey, what is the smallest action that you can, right? So still allowing them and ensuring that there's something that they're wanting to plan between sessions, and not just, it's not a satsang that they feel good about, have their insights and sleep over it without taking any action or reflection in the real life scenario. Then it doesn't serve any purpose, is what we need to be mindful of as coaches as well. Client dependence is one challenge that I've also seen. Sometimes a lot of clients rely so heavily on the solutions they want from the coach. And the other one, which is so related, is sometimes coaches overstepping boundaries, is what I have learned through a lot of shared discussions in a coaching, coaches cohort. We need to be mindful of that as well. Our need to help them to be in an advising mode. We really want to see them grow more than they want to grow. Yeah. So these two are pretty much those kind of challenges we need to be mindful of. And something that came up for me so effectively and powerfully was what Peterson writes in his Good to Great coaching article that we read. And it said that translating insight into action in the real world is so much more difficult. And therefore, those coaches who feel good about the highly positive feedback, which is what we sometimes see that you're getting during the session, that they don't want to go and push themselves and engage in that awkward part of coaching where there is little reward, and which is actually translating the insights that or the discoveries that have happened here into real life. Because most of the times you are not the one where the finger is pointed or the compass needle is pointing and saying, you are the one who made this change, helped us make this change. Yeah. It is during the session that we are made to feel good about that, hey, your session was so powerful, and the coach is all praises, and we feel good about us because we are good coaches. But this is absolutely essential for lasting results. And if we are a great coach, we will focus on it. And with that mindful moment, I would like to thank all of you and close this session. Thank you so much for being here and helping me learn through this journey while sharing what I had to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharti. I think Renu had to drop off, and really appreciate the time. And thank you again for a beautiful session.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you for your patience. I'll stop recording.
Thank you so much, Bharti. I